Welcome to the One Advantage podcast, exploring the intersections of peer power, culture, and agility. Your hosts, Mike Richardson, Jason Richmond, and Leo Bottary, co-founders of the One Advantage community of practice and Advantage peer groups. For more information, please visit us at the One Advantage podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the One Advantage podcast. And got Jason here, got Leo here. Wait. We got a full house 2 weeks in a row. How can that be? That is just amazing. We'll find out what's going on here. There's something strange really going on. We are here to talk about a good one today, everybody. Culture toxicity. I had to practice that before we started here. Turning a toxic culture into a healthy culture. A healthy workplace culture can help grow your business, and it's vital to nurture your culture to ensure it stays that way. Negativity, dysfunction, and a lack of trust are characteristics of a toxic culture and can grow quickly as employees become disengaged. Want to know what you should look for? Then you are in the right place to talk to Jason, Leo, and I. But of course, as always, we find out what everybody's been up to and how the heck do you happen to be here 2 weeks in a row, Leo? How does that happen?
You know, just getting Fridays off lately, which is nice. You know, busy awesome. The weekends and during the week, and 2 Fridays in a row. I find myself home,
good.
Which is wonderful.
Awesome. Actually, what have you been up to?
Good. So travel quite a bit. Denver and you know, throughout California this week, and then next week I'll be in Ohio and I'll be in North Carolina, and then the following week a little bit of travel, but then
cool.
Off to Cabo for 5 days. So
there we are, lovely, jubbly, and
that's not work related.
Peer innovation stuff, left, right, and center. Everybody, just tell us a bit more, Leo. How's the whole peer innovation process going for you?
Well, you know, a couple things. What I had always hoped would happen, although I love the group work and I will always continue to work with CEO peer advisory groups and all, but the big shift because of the need in the marketplace right now in terms of really getting teams, you know, kind of to hit the reset button and kind of figure out what they expect of themselves, what they expect of others in the teams, create clarity with one another and what that looks like so that they can, you know, just move forward really, and do so in a way that is most certainly not pre-2020. And so that's been exciting. But when you get people to determine that for themselves and to really own how they're going to work going forward, makes all the difference.
Yeah, I keep Leo's book on my bookshelf right here, everybody. The first book. I need to get a copy of your peer innovation book. I don't have a physical one, Leo. I only have it electronically.
Well, we need to we'll fix that.
Yeah, I pull your book off the shelf more times than you know, and show it on various webinars and things. And so it sounds like peer innovation is really coming through, Leo. That peer-powered innovation inside of companies is fantastic. Great to hear it. And Jason, where are you? St. Thomas, Colorado.
Well,
where are you?
I'm in Colorado finally, and I assume there's golf clubs in Leo's future. Not so much mine. I've got snow on the ground today, Mike. No, this week has been great. I've been in the trenches. I spent this week traveling the country, spending time individually with team members, working on client projects, working on internal development projects. I got a chance to spend, one-on-one quality time with several members of the team,
Beautiful.
And of course, every conversation we have, every meeting we have, every opportunity we have, of course, there's a culture element about toxicity and what to avoid. And really our culture conversations with individual team members went from, what as a leader, as a CEO, what do I need to keep doing? What do I need to quit doing? What do we need to do more of? What do we need to do less of? Those types of things.
Awesome.
So I've really had a great week, like I said, in the trenches, working with individuals on the team, getting that personal interaction and time with them, and pushing projects across the finish lines, that sort of thing.
Awesome. Great. Well, I've just done 2 webinars in 2 days. a really interesting one this morning with a fellow agility specialist, a gentleman called Leo Tillman, who, wow, what a resume he has, and what a fantastic book he wrote. And it was just such a thrill to be hosting a webinar with another agility expert on the other end of the line, as it were. And then yesterday I did a webinar that was very UK oriented, where, as you both know, because we're all somewhat involved now with Renaissance Executive Forums, we're putting a big push into the UK and building out our footprint of forum leaders and members and programs there. So we're really excited about that. And we were doing a webinar yesterday, very audience interactive, sharing experiences, and we then roll into a podcast every 2 weeks. And guess, Jason, who I have lined up as guest number one for the very first podcast.
Can't tell. I have no idea.
He's here with us. He's here with us today. The one, the only, Leo Bottary. I try to say
you can't go wrong with the Leos, between the last guest and it's a slam dunk. So
and I don't know if it's just me, but your camera was frozen there for a little bit. It's snapped back now, but we're good. All right, so welcome everybody, a full house. It's amazing. Culture. Let's talk about the difference between toxic cultures and healthy cultures. And Jason, this is especially your wheelhouse. And there's so many statistics out there, aren't there, of why people leave companies. They actually leave managers. They leave cultures in many ways. When you think about this whole toxicity of culture, what do you think about?
I've been pondering this question, and my short answer to this, Mike, is that at the core of, in my opinion, at the core of toxic cultures is organizations and leaders have lost, totally lost the importance of relationships and connections within the organization, right? Now, that's different than saying a lack of. Coming out of COVID, coming out of business change, coming out of new ways of working, coming out of everything we've talked about for months.
Yep.
I'm seeing a loss of importance with that correlation of having that relationship and that connection with your workforce. And, people ask me, what I'm seeing and why do I say that, and why is this happening? And again, I've been pondering this, our world is getting pushed more and more to a commodity world, right? How many times have you called a customer service line or went to an organization and look at airlines, look at just about any aspect of life, right? Well, you can go to the app to do that. You can go to online and do that. You don't need to call. You don't need to come in anymore, right? So our operational landscape today has changed. We are fundamentally going to more of a commodity-focused mindset and value system.
Right.
And I think leaders and managers are taking that same mindset into leadership. And what I'm seeing is that leaders and managers are treating individual community contributors as a commodity,
right?
Not as a value provider. And that alone is creating toxicity. It's creating ultimately horrible cultures. We cannot treat our workforce like a commodity.
Because it's in exactly the wrong direction,
Yep.
right? We should be going 180 degrees in the other direction.
Exactly.
And Leo, I've heard you say before, I think it was last time actually, let's not use the word culture, let's use the word relationship. So what would you add on to what Jason was just saying? And how do you think about this whole culture toxicity thing?
Well, when this topic first came up, it really did remind me of Dave Logan and several other co-authors put a book together called Tribal Leadership. Originally back in 2008, there's been an additional edition since that time. And it was a study of thousands of companies across the US. And there were three of the cultures that I would put in the category of really being toxic, right? It was that stage 1 culture, the life sucks culture. Think about it, right? 1% to 2% of companies in the US that have a company that he would equate with that of a prison gang. It was so, awful, right?
Yeah.
The second one, stage 2, by the way, was 26% of companies in the US, my life sucks culture, right? So your life might be great, mine not so much. I'm walking around with a coffee mug that says, is it 5 o'clock yet? I've got a t-shirt that says, can't wait for the weekend. I'm not interested in achieving any standard of excellence in my job. If I can do as little as humanly possible and avoid being fired by Friday, that's good enough for me. And then last but not least, because the other two were actually very positive cultures, but then he's got this kind of like companies that are 49%, by the way, that are led by the leader who's I'm great with the parenthetical and you're not, right? So basically you're good, but you're never going to be as good as me. There's a lot of dyad relationships with the leaders. There's no real team stuff going on. All of these cultures have the potential of being incredibly toxic. So when you start looking at the numbers and some of the statistics that, we were looking at, of course, to prepare for this podcast, when you think about the number of people that leave their job because of some level of a toxic environment, this paints a picture for you of how pervasive that can be. Not only in the US, but around the world. And so it's pretty horrifying. So,
How do I say this nicely, Jason? How do I say this nicely? Jason, these podcasts are always good when you and I are here, but when Leo's here, they're great. And they're great. They're great when you're here too, Jason. You know what I mean? Jason, I feel that you deserve an opportunity to react and respond to what Leo just said, because that was awesome, Leo.
Well, yeah, let me do that. Let me talk to you about. Let me share a story with you about Michael.
Whoa! Not this Michael, right?
No, not that Michael. Michael's about 30, 32, 33 years old. I've been a coach and a mentor to Michael for probably a little over 2 years now. And he's not on my team. He's not in my industry. Someone outside. And it was just a couple weeks ago. It was probably about 10 o'clock at night. My phone rang. I picked it up. It was Michael. We had this conversation, and he says, I have a dilemma. Now, he's been working with the same organization for about 3 years. He's in a nice position. He's got a nice title, but he's just not getting any fulfillment out of his job. Right? It's the company's growing, but he feels very stagnated, kind of plateaued in his career and everything. Long story short, he got recruited and recruited for similar type of position within his industry, roughly the same compensation, maybe $10,000, $15,000 more a year. And he felt like he might have had a new opportunity, but it's scary, it's risk, it's change. So he calls me, and we start talking about all these elements of culture that even allowed him to consider moving to a different company.
Right.
And I challenged him. I says, he wanted to accept this new position and he wanted to work through how to resign. And I challenged him to go back to his organization, his leader, and tell him the story, tell him the situation, but tell him the cultural reasons and the disconnect reasons and the things that aren't happening, which is kind of what Leo was talking about. And all of a sudden, his company said, we're going to give you a $22,000 raise. We're going to fix all these things. Well, you know what Michael said? How come it took me coming to you and leaving for you to put effort in fixing all these things? I'm sorry, that's not going to do it. He's now moved on to a new gig. I'll follow up with him next week. He's a couple weeks into his new job. Yeah. Right? But it's that. Yeah. It's that unknown. It's the unawareness. It's the I don't care until it's too late mentality. Yeah. And I can't wait to talk to him to see how his first couple of weeks went on in his new opportunity.
That's a great story.
Yeah, and it relates to what Leo's saying. Yeah. I mean, we just turn our head to it. Let's not make it a priority until it's too late.
Yeah, and both of these really go where I wanted to go when I was pondering this. I couldn't help but end up in a place where I said often a toxic culture is hiding in plain sight. Yeah. You know that concept of something hiding in plain sight. It's like when we ultimately found, Bin Laden, right? He was hiding in plain sight, right next door to, a military encampment. And for me, when I think about a toxic culture, it's often hiding in plain sight, just behind the football table, right beside the beach barbecue, and just beside, the monthly town hall meetings. And it's almost like everybody knows that some of these toxic things exist, but they don't call them out. And where they are in plain sight is people are drifting into meetings late. Mm-hmm. People haven't done what they said they were going to do. What Leo was talking about, regarding the ego and I'm the smart one, I've got the answers. Yeah. And yet when you ask people, then these things reveal themselves so clearly, so fully, and so impactfully, and yet they're sort of hanging out in the hallways and they go unspoken. Why is that? Why is that? I guess it's fear, right? People are afraid of speaking up, perhaps, until they feel like, in Michael's case, they feel like, well, I've got a safety net here that I can fall back on if I need to. I'll go and give it a shot and see what happens because I've got a parachute if I need one.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think from the individual contributor standpoint, the perception that any type of feedback or influence around this type of situation is just going to fall on deaf ears.
Yeah. It's not
Leo, and I think and that's to your point about, the leaders have to own this. They have to pay attention to this. They have to be watchful and mindful of it. And a lot of it comes down to that lack of clarity that we talked about in a previous episode, right? When we were talking about that whole Grammarly-Harris poll piece about U.S. companies losing $1 trillion annually due to lack of clarity and communication. Yeah. When we lack clarity, so here's a couple of things that happen. We fill in the blanks ourselves, and it's usually bad and it's usually wrong. And by the way, when you look at Edelman Trust Barometer data, for example, it'll say basically the top source of workplace information is other employees. Mm-hmm. So now when you have, and by the way, in that same poll, it had 6% of the people who responded, they just didn't know what was going on, no matter what. They were actively disengaged to the point where, regardless of all the ways that information would be available to them, right? But when you lack clarity and your information is coming from other people who lack clarity as well, who start creating their own narratives, mostly negative, about what's going on and why and motives and all this craziness, right? This is just infects a culture in such a horrible way, and again goes back to what you're saying, Mike, and what we alluded to before, this idea of relationships, and those relationships that now there's no trust, there's no communication, there's no, and it's just bad. And
Leo, bring this back to reality. I mean, every business out there has life cycles. Customer life cycles, product life cycles, name it, right? And think about how fast an organization moves or addresses if a product life cycle starts flatlining or evening out, or a client life cycle, they start seeing lead indicators that it's kind of tapering off or plateauing, right? Culture is exactly the same way. Every organization's culture at some point will go through life cycles, and they will go through a plateau or a stagnation, right? Leaders have to be as deliberate, as in tuned, as eager to jump on that situation as they would a product or a customer life cycle. And Microsoft coined this really well. Microsoft came out with an article not too long ago and coined this as re-recruit your employees.
Right.
Right. You got this life cycle of your culture to a certain level. A lot of things are impacting that culture. every once in a while you have to level set because it is going to plateau, and you got to re-recruit your employees and get them back on, you know, in the culture they need to be in.
Yeah, I really like this, Jason. And you know, in my agility work, I bring things down to meetings, right? Mm-hmm. And how do you drive a portfolio of meetings? And of course, if you were to look at the portfolio, the matrix of meetings that most businesses have, they'll have some kind of meeting that happens quarterly or monthly called product strategy, right? Yeah. We know that if we don't sustain a very proactive, aggressive, preemptive conversation flow and execution flow about product strategy, then our products will fall behind, our revenue go off the boil. It's like obvious, right? And there may be another meeting about facility strategy, because if we don't invest in sustaining our facilities and our shop floor and all of that, but rarely do I ever see one called culture strategy, right? In its most holistic form. Oh, well, we might talk about the newsletter. We might talk about this year's holiday party. We might talk about, you know, talent management, but a culture strategy is a much bigger thing than that. Yep. And I have yet to see anybody have that rigorously in a recurring way in their portfolio of meetings. And I'm probably forgetting some exceptions to that rule.
Sure.
Yeah, the other thing, I think, Jason, you make a great point about life cycle too, because it's not only that leaders have to be aware of toxicity, but they also have to be not the cause of it. So that when you're in that cycle where things are maybe not going well, we can all be affable and wonderful and everything when times are good. When times are more challenging, how are we responding as leaders? Are we in fact the source of that toxicity? There's a great book written by Robert H. Thompson called The Offsite, and in it, the metaphor for leadership is not the person running the hotel or the person running the meeting. It was the groundskeeper. And the groundskeeper, as you might imagine, doesn't yell at the plants to make them grow faster, right? I mean, think about this. So, but this is what we do. We treat people this way, and we wonder why the hell they respond the way they do. And, you know, it's just not, it's not right. And we got to own that. You know?
It goes back to the commodity concept, right? We can't treat people that way. Yeah. Mike, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, because I think obviously we love to have fun in these podcasts and all of that, but there is a sort of obviously a very serious aspect to this, listeners. We know that some of you out there, many of you out there, are actually trying very hard to be a good leader. And we wouldn't in any way, shape or form want to sort of belittle that challenge. Boy, oh boy, do we know how big and complex and difficult a challenge that is. Mm-hmm. And I personally, you know, and all of us, I'll speak for myself though, we are leaders, we've been leaders. And it goes back to a phrase similar to one you used in recent podcasts, Jason. You talked about productivity paranoia.
Yeah.
But that was more to do with micromanagement. I use another phrase very similar called productive paranoia, which is called a constructive paranoia, right? I, frankly, as a leader, am productively paranoid about what's being said about me in the parking lot. What's being said about my communication, my leadership style, my energy that I'm bringing to this organization, and what am I going to do to never stop trying to move the needle in a positive direction, such that there'll be more positive said about me in the parking lot and less negative. But I realize it'll never be 100% positive. It can't ever be that, because I will have fumbled the ball in some meeting, on some talk track, on some issue, somewhere or other, and I just have to take that on the chin and try to do better and better and better, and never, ever, ever stop trying to move that needle in a positive direction. That's what we're really saying, everybody, is that your culture is probably a little more toxic, maybe even a lot more toxic than you realize. We're not saying it's a disaster, but it probably isn't as good as you think it is, or at least that's the only safe assumption. And the next question is, and what are you going to do about that? Is that fair?
I think it's very fair. You know, Mike, people ask me, where's this all going? Right. And take a look at the world we live in right now. The geopolitical storms, the economic storms, everything that's infecting all our businesses. I think the three of us are going to get really busy.
Busy is good.
And that's good, because I really believe that, you know, we're headed towards somewhat of a recession, right? I have a hard time believing that people don't think that's probably in our future. That impacts organizations, structures, businesses, budgets, you know, operational standards. It's going to impact our business in ways that's going to ultimately impact your culture. And if you're not on top of that, you want to keep the right people. You want to retain the best of the best. You want them engaged. You want your people to help you get through economic times.
Yeah.
Not be a victim of them.
Yeah. Did you catch what Leo just said, by the way?
No.
He said, I'm busy now. and by the way, of course, again, a serious point. That's actually quite likely a reaction that many of our listeners might be having, which is, I'm already so busy trying to firefight, you know, what I have to deal with right here in the present, or tomorrow, or Monday, and next week. I don't have time to add this culture strategy meeting into the flow of my reality. It's, well, you will have time. What's that saying? You always find time to put it right when something breaks or doesn't go well, and yet you convince yourself you couldn't find time to get it right in the first place. You can find time to get it right in the first place. What do you think, Leo?
I think you have to find time to get it right. I don't think there's really much of a choice here, to your point. And by the way, whatever time you're spending to get it right now, you're going to spend 10 times more, time trying to fix it, later on. So we have to be on top of this. We've got to be proactive about it. We have to pay attention to our culture. We have to pay attention to our communication and not commoditizing it, as Jason said. And, it's so important.
Jason, what is, one thing at least, maybe sort of front and center, that you would invite our leaders who are listening to us right now? What's something they could think about starting to pull the trigger on Monday next week, before Thanksgiving, before the holidays kick in, before the end of the year? What's one or two things they could think about doing to set themselves up well for next calendar year to really lean into this? What would you suggest?
Take a deliberate action and talk to every one of your direct reports.
Yeah.
And talk to them about the relationship you have with them and the relationship that they have with their work.
Yeah.
And really share with them authentically that you care about them going into this holiday season, going into 2023, going in the direction we're in. Be deliberate, make a point to make a connection with every one of your direct reports.
Wow. What a cool way that would be, listeners, for you personally to finish your year. Yes, of course, you're going to have a list of issues that you need to deal with, right? That next year that they put on the list. And though you can feel really good and at peace that you made a connection and that you built a bridge, and that's something you can work with as you go into next year. So, and by the way, there's plenty of white space in and around the holiday season for you to make that happen. No excuses. You can absolutely make that happen. Even if you've got 6 or 9 direct reports, you can make that happen. Correct, Jason?
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. And Leo, what's one thing that, if you could, you would encourage people, in the next few days, weeks, months, to sort of lean into doing to try to move the needle on all of this?
2 things, really. One, and I would really double down on this idea of clarity and making sure that I'm clear with people on what's expected of them and what that looks like. And because the reality also is that people do get information from other employees. I would identify those key influential employees you have out there that may not be the most senior level people in your organization, but they have a lot of sway with their peers, and make sure they can be clarity ambassadors for you out there, and then make sure that when those conversations start taking place about what's going on, that they are involved in serving the organization. And I think a powerful way.
Yeah, awesome stuff. And if it was me, I would be tempted, if you're a CEO or an executive out there, I would be tempted to go find your senior HR person, or maybe they're called talent person, or they're called something else. But whoever your most senior people person is in your business, I would ask to have a meeting with them, and I would ask them to work with you on a more strategic plan than ever before. And if they come back to you with a first draft of a plan where they're talking about newsletters and Christmas parties and beach barbecues, then I would give it back to them and ask them to come back with a 2.0 and a 3.0. And you just keep iterating with them until you feel you have a strategic plan for HR that is up to the task of truly, progressively moving the needle on your culture out of the toxic red zone and into the healthy green zone, and just adopt a relentless commitment to that with you and whoever your chief people person partner is. That would be the one thing that I would set in motion during the holiday period here. Jason, any final thoughts?
I'm just going to reiterate, relationships and connection with your employees. Don't let your culture plateau.
Yeah. Leo, final thoughts?
Clarity, clarity, clarity.
Awesome, guys. Well, hey, everybody, we had another full house here. That's 2 weeks in a row, or two podcasts in a row. We will see if we can keep that trend up. It's all fun. And come on back next time, everybody, for the next episode of the One Advantage podcast. We'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to the One Advantage podcast. If you liked this episode, please consider helping us by rating us wherever you listen, spreading the word, having us as a guest on your podcast or webinar, and mentioning us in social media. Find us at the One Advantage podcast, where you can get more information about us and this episode. Thanks again for listening, and we look forward to more great episodes to come.